I booked the Airbnb because it was a small cabin in the mountains, and I thought it would be perfect for a weekend away from work. The pictures showed a cute wooden cabin with a stone fireplace, a small deck out back, and lots of trees surrounding it. The host mentioned in the listing that there was a shed in the backyard, for maintenance only, and I shouldn't open it. I read it, shrugged, and thought nothing of it. Maintenance sheds exist everywhere: tools, cleaning supplies, maybe a lawnmower. No big deal. The first day was normal. I drove up winding roads, past tall pines and rocky outcrops. The cabin was tucked in a small clearing, quiet and peaceful. I brought groceries, set up my things, and spent the day exploring nearby trails. The cabin felt secure: wood walls, strong locks on the doors, a sense that it had been here for years. I cooked dinner, ate at the little dining table, then sat on the deck in the evening with a cup of tea. The air was crisp, cold even, but clear. Stars overhead, soft wind rustling the trees. The first night was quiet. I slept well, the kind of deep, heavy sleep you only get when you're exhausted and somewhere remote. I didn't hear anything unusual. It was the second night that things changed. I was sitting on the deck again, this time with a blanket around my shoulders and a bottle of water on the table. The moon was behind clouds, making everything dim. Somewhere in the dark, the trees whispered in the wind. I had headphones on, listening to music, when I thought I heard something else. A faint sound, slow and deliberate. At first, I ignored it. The shed was small, tucked to the side of the cabin. Maybe it was the wind, maybe a raccoon or some small animal. But then the sound became distinct. A shifting, like someone inside the shed was adjusting their weight. Not fast, not frantic, just slow, measured movement. I froze. My stomach dropped. I didn't move, didn't breathe loudly, just listened. Then there was a tap. One solid tap against the wooden wall. Then another. Steady, deliberate, not random, not animal, not a branch hitting wood. Someone was in there. I wanted to call out. I wanted to run. I wanted to convince myself it was nothing. But every instinct screamed that this wasn't nothing. My mind raced. The shed was supposed to be locked, for maintenance only. Only the host should have had access. But here it was, someone moving inside, maybe watching. I went inside, shutting and locking all the doors. I turned on every light I could, checking that the deadbolt and window latches were secure. I kept the blinds closed, the fireplace off, and tried to tell myself it was probably just a prank or someone checking the property. Maybe a maintenance worker forgot to leave. But it didn't feel like that. The taps, the slow shifts, the deliberate pauses, they felt intentional, personal. Hours passed. Couldn't sleep. My ears strained with every creak of the cabin, every groan of the wooden floor, every brush of wind against the walls. Then, around midnight, I couldn't resist checking outside. I pulled the curtain back just slightly, careful not to make the glass rattle. That's when I saw it. The shed door, slightly open, not wide, not a crack, just enough to show that someone or something had peeked out. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard, every instinct in my body telling me to call the police immediately, but I stayed still, staring. The air outside felt colder, almost heavy, like it carried tension. I stayed inside, lights on, all doors locked, staring out at the shed until dawn. I didn't sleep. I just sat in a chair, watching the trees and waiting for daylight. When the first light came, I grabbed my phone and started recording. I stepped outside slowly, keeping my eyes on the shed. The door was now closed. The air smelled damp, like rain had passed earlier, but the ground was mostly dry. My hands shook as I approached. The closer I got, the more I noticed small details. The grass was flattened in a path toward the shed, footprints faint but visible in the soft dirt, and a smell that reminded me of old blankets and damp wood. I pushed the door open. My heart raced as I shined my phone flashlight around the inside. The shed was small, just a few shelves, a rake, some boxes, and a workbench. But the floor told another story. Crushed blankets were spread out in an area that looked like it had been used as a makeshift bed. Food wrappers, empty cans, and a small bucket filled with water were scattered around. Signs of someone living here quietly, for who knows how long. The blankets were still warm. That was the part that made my stomach twist and my hands sweat. Someone had been here recently. Someone had been inside the shed in the night while I slept, listening, maybe even watching from the windows of the cabin. The thought made my skin crawl. I walked back to the cabin slowly, keeping the shed in view the whole time. I didn't want to leave, but I couldn't just stay there either. I took videos of the inside of the shed, the blankets, the floor, every detail I could capture. My hands shook so badly that I had to hold the camera with both hands and focus carefully. When I got back inside, I called Airbnb immediately. I reported everything, sent them the videos, and explained the situation. The host responded by removing the listing entirely, but I never received an apology or an explanation. Nothing about who might have been in the shed or whether it had been accessed before I arrived. Just silence after that. I stayed at a nearby motel for the next few nights, unable to face the cabin again. The images of the blankets, the bucket of water, and the crushed food wrappers kept playing in my mind. I kept thinking about how close they had been, how deliberate they had been, and how easily they could have gotten into the cabin if I hadn't been awake and cautious. Even now, months later, I think about it. I replay the night over and over, trying to rationalize it, but I can't. The cabin seemed innocent in the listing photos, the shed a simple maintenance area. But the reality was different. Someone had been living there, quietly, just out of sight, potentially watching guests without them knowing. The thought of someone entering that shed while people slept in the cabin, knowing every detail of the layout, every window, every door, chills me even now. I haven't stayed in a cabin near the woods since. Every Airbnb I book, I check for sheds, outbuildings, anything that could hide someone. I inspect doors, locks, even the outside areas at night before I settle in. I still wake up sometimes at night and glance at the corners of rooms, imagining someone peeking from a hidden space. The fear hasn't gone away. And the thing that still haunts me the most, the blankets were warm. That was proof. Proof that someone had been there while I was supposed to be alone. Proof that it wasn't just my imagination. Proof that the world is bigger and stranger than it seems, and sometimes the safest looking places aren't safe at all. I haven't forgotten. I probably never will. I booked the Airbnb because it was cheap, quiet, and completely private. The listing showed a small cabin tucked deep in the woods, down a long gravel driveway, completely surrounded by trees. It was exactly what I thought I wanted. Isolation, peace, and a place to disconnect from work, my phone, and the city. During the day, it was everything it promised. Sunlight filtered through the trees, birds chirped, and the gravel crunch under the tires made the cabin feel like it was miles away from anywhere else. I unpacked, stretched, and walked around the property, feeling completely at ease. The first night, I was exhausted. I cooked something simple, ate in the small kitchen, and went to bed around 10:30. The cabin was quiet, peaceful. I left the lights off in the living room, keeping only the bedroom lamp on. I had the window cracked open slightly to let in the fresh night air. Everything felt safe. Around 11:30 p.m., I saw headlights in the distance. My first thought was maybe a neighbor, or someone lost trying to find a road that probably didn't even appear on my GPS. But the lights didn't move past the trees. They stopped at the end of the driveway. I squinted out the window. A dark SUV, unmarked, no license plates, sat facing the cabin. No lights, no movement, just parked. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe a delivery truck? A maintenance worker? Morning came and it was gone. I shrugged it off, even though there was a strange knot in my stomach. The second night was when it became clear that this wasn't a coincidence. Around sunset, I noticed the SUV again, this time sitting a little closer, maybe 20 feet closer to the cabin. Still facing the house, still silent, still motionless. I watched from the window, tension building with every passing minute. The vehicle never came up the driveway. It never drove away, just sat there, watching. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the host had hired a security company because the property was remote. Maybe it was nothing to worry about, but it didn't feel right. The SUV was too deliberate. It didn't move unless it was sunrise, and the timing was perfect, as if it knew when I would be awake or asleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone inside knew exactly where I was in the cabin. By the third night, my unease had grown into full-blown fear. I hadn't slept well, and every creak of the cabin made my nerves jump. Around 9:30 p.m., I looked out the window again and saw the SUV closer than before, just past the edge of the treeline. I could make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat. Not moving, not adjusting, not leaning forward or back. Just sitting, staring at the house. My hands shook. I didn't dare move closer to the window. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know if they'd believe me in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a silhouette. I realized that the safest thing was to get out of there before the night went on. I packed as quickly and quietly as I could. I left my bags by the door, turned off the lights, and tried not to make a sound. The SUV didn't move. I felt the weight of someone watching me, but I forced myself to stay calm, forcing my breathing to remain steady. I decided the only safe option was to leave through the back window. The cabin had a small deck, and beyond it was thick woods. I climbed out carefully, trying to keep low, and moved into the trees. The ground was uneven, the branches clawing at my arms and face, but I didn't care. Every step away from the cabin felt like gaining a few inches of safety. I walked for what felt like an eternity. My shoes sank into soft dirt and fallen leaves. My heart was racing, my hands bleeding from the branches I had brushed against. The SUV never moved. I didn't look back. I just kept moving. Eventually, I stumbled onto the main road that ran past the property. I was lucky. Within a few minutes, a passing truck slowed down and the driver noticed me. I explained briefly that I needed to get into town. They dropped me at the nearest gas station, and I stayed there until daylight. When I checked the listing a week later, I saw that the host had updated the description with a single line. "Please ignore the security vehicle at night." That sentence still haunts me. It wasn't there when I booked the place. There was no mention of security in the listing at all. It wasn't "sometimes there is a vehicle" or "property occasionally monitored." It was just that line, casually telling future guests to ignore the SUV parked at the end of the driveway, silently observing. The wording implied knowledge. It implied intentionality. It implied that the host knew someone or multiple people would see the vehicle each night. I never reported it. Part of me was still in shock. Part of me thought maybe the host really did mean it as security. But deep down, I knew it wasn't security. Security wouldn't park in the dark, silently, unmarked, without approaching the house. Security wouldn't let someone in the house feel watched and cornered. Security wouldn't have the SUV pull a few feet closer each night, building fear deliberately. Sometimes I replay the nights in my mind. The way the SUV would wait at the end of the driveway, lights off, silent, like it was calculating how I would respond. The second night, when it edged closer, just enough to remind me it was there. The third night, when I could see the silhouette of the driver sitting still, watching, not doing anything but waiting. The anticipation, the waiting, the unspoken pressure. It was worse than anything physical could have been. I think about what could have happened if I had stayed another night. If I had tried to sleep, pretending not to notice, letting fear creep in while the dark SUV waited outside. I imagine the headlights suddenly flicking on, the vehicle moving closer, or someone stepping out and approaching the cabin. My stomach tightens just thinking about it. The SUV wasn't random. It was deliberate. The way it was positioned, the timing of its arrival and departure, the patience, it all pointed to intention. I haven't stayed in a rural Airbnb like that since. Every time I see a rental off a long driveway, surrounded by trees, I think about the SUV. I check the parking situation, the surrounding area, even the reflections in windows. My trust in the supposed peaceful isolation of a remote rental is gone. What terrifies me the most isn't the vehicle itself. It's the knowledge that someone could have been inside it for nights, waiting, watching, seeing everything I did. Someone could have known when I slept, when I moved, when I left the cabin. That thought lingers longer than any physical danger. It's the anticipation of what could have been, the feeling of being silently observed without escape. I think about it sometimes at night, lying in a hotel room, listening to the faint hum of distant traffic. I imagine the SUV at the end of the driveway, engine off, shadowed figure waiting in the seat, watching quietly. It's impossible to shake the feeling that somewhere, someone could be doing the same, calculating, waiting, just like they did that night. And I know that if I hadn't acted quickly, if I had stayed another night, I might have learned exactly what that vehicle was for. I may have seen the real intent behind the silhouette, the stillness, the watchfulness. That thought stays with me every time I think about rural rentals, empty driveways, and the false sense of peace in places that feel isolated. I never returned to that property. I never booked another Airbnb in that area. But the image of the dark SUV, motionless at the edge of the driveway, and the knowledge that someone, or maybe the host, expected me to simply ignore it, stays with me. Every time I drive down a long, empty road at night, I glance in the trees and wonder if I'll see that same shadow waiting, patient and deliberate, just watching. I booked the Airbnb because it was cheap and close to the downtown area. The listing looked fine. Small, clean, a bedroom, a kitchen, a living area. Nothing fancy, but I didn't need fancy. The host had left a few amenities which seemed thoughtful. A bottle of water, a small welcome note, a few toiletries, and a phone charger already plugged into the wall next to the bed. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was convenient, and I was tired from driving. I just wanted to get settled in. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked a few things, cooked a quick dinner, and went to bed around 11. The apartment smelled faintly of cleaner, the kind of smell that usually meant someone had tried to make it look fresh but hadn't opened the windows to air it out. I didn't care. I was exhausted. It wasn't until the next evening that I actually used the charger. I pulled out my phone, plugged it into the wall unit next to the bed, and continued scrolling while lying on my side. Within a few minutes, my phone started to get hot. Not just warm, the kind of heat you get from running too many apps, but hot in a way that made my hand tingle. Felt like it was being forced to do something. I unplugged it immediately, trying to convince myself it was just the phone being old or the charger being cheap. That's when I noticed it. A tiny red LED light blinking faintly inside the charger port. It was small, almost invisible, but unmistakable once I saw it. My stomach sank. I had seen devices like this before in news articles and tech forums. Data skimmers. Devices designed to copy information, hack phones, and transmit it elsewhere. The realization hit me slowly, like cold water down my spine. I pulled the charger off the wall and looked closer. The back of it wasn't normal. There was a small circuit board inside, and a tiny micro SD card taped underneath. Everything about it screamed intentional. Someone had modified that charger specifically to access a guest's device. And the placement of it, directly next to the bed, made my stomach twist. Whoever did this expected someone to use it while they slept. Expected them to trust it. I felt exposed. I felt violated. The thought that someone had spent time preparing that device, knowing that anyone who stayed there would plug in their phone, was almost too much to process. I wanted to scream, to leave immediately, to call someone, but I just froze for a few seconds, staring at the tiny, blinking red light. I packed my bag as quickly as I could. I didn't take time to clean up, didn't check the rest of the apartment for other devices, didn't even think to photograph it. Every instinct screamed to leave. I left within 10 minutes, locking the door behind me and walking to my car in a daze. The streets outside felt normal, like nothing had happened, but every step felt heavy. My heart was racing, my hands trembling, and I couldn't stop thinking about the device. Once I was safely in my car, I called Airbnb. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice was still shaking. I described the charger, the LED, the circuit board, and the SD card. I explained that it was plugged in directly next to the bed and that it had been used as a trap. The representative promised to investigate and assured me that they would remove the listing if my report was accurate. It didn't take long. Within a few weeks, the listing was removed entirely. Airbnb sent me a brief message confirming that the host had violated their rules and that the account would be reviewed. No further explanation, no apology, no reassurance that nothing had been done with the data that might have been collected. Just a simple confirmation. The worst part wasn't the device itself. The device could be destroyed, thrown away, or removed. The worst part was knowing the host had intentionally placed it there. They had anticipated guests using it, anticipated them trusting a plugged-in device. They had set a trap in a private space, knowing people would be vulnerable while sleeping, lying in bed, scrolling through personal messages, checking emails, or handling sensitive information. The premeditation, the fact that someone had thought this through, was what made my skin crawl. After that, traveling felt different. I stopped trusting plug-ins in hotel rooms and rentals. I started carrying my own charger, a portable battery, and even a USB data blocker for emergencies. Every time I enter a rental, I check the outlets, the furniture, the small appliances, lamps, alarm clocks, anything that could hide a chip or a micro SD card. I inspect chargers carefully, knowing that a seemingly innocent device could be a trap. Even now, months later, the memory lingers. I can see the tiny red LED blinking in my mind, just faint enough to notice, but unmistakable once you see it. I remember the feeling of my phone heating in my hand, the sense of forced activity, the subtle hum of electronics that shouldn't have been there. And I remember the cold realization that someone had deliberately tried to access my personal data, to violate my privacy in a place where I should have been safe. The thought that someone had done this not once, but intentionally for any guest who stayed there, is the part that haunts me the most. I think about the timing, the placement, the careful modifications to the charger, and the fact that they had calculated the chance of success. They had considered human behavior, expected me to plug in my phone, expected me to fall asleep, expected me to trust the space. That kind of planning, that kind of anticipation, is worse than any physical danger. I haven't stayed in an Airbnb without double-checking every outlet since. Every small device, every charger, every lamp, I check, disassemble, and inspect if I can. I carry my own electronics and avoid using anything left behind by a host. I've become hyper-aware of small details, of the way a room is set up, and of the trust we automatically give to spaces labeled private or guest-ready. And the part that stays with me, the part that never goes away, isn't just the device. It's knowing someone was ready for me to use it. Someone planned it. Someone expected me to lie in that bed, late at night, phone in hand, and unknowingly hand over information. That calculated intent, that understanding of vulnerability, is the scariest part. I sometimes think about what could have happened if I hadn't noticed the heat in my phone or the tiny red light. I wonder how many guests had stayed there before me or after, and whether they had noticed, whether their data had been accessed. The uncertainty is worse than the event itself. The fear isn't just about the device, it's about the expectation, the knowledge that someone had set a trap specifically designed to exploit my trust and my normal, everyday behavior. It's a memory that lingers in every outlet I see now, every hotel room, every rental space. I plug in my own chargers, I check my devices carefully, I carry a portable battery. But I can't erase the knowledge of what that host did. I can't stop thinking about the calculated effort behind that one small, seemingly innocent device. The fear isn't gone. I don't think it ever will be. I booked the Airbnb because it was cheap, close to the highway, and supposedly quiet. The listing showed a small house on the outskirts of a small town, surrounded by trees and a wide, open yard. It looked normal, well-kept siding, a porch with a few chairs, and a gravel driveway leading up to it. The host had left a few notes about using the Wi-Fi and some basic instructions about garbage collection and parking. Nothing about anything unusual. I was traveling for work and just wanted somewhere to sleep and get some rest before early meetings the next morning. When I arrived, the house looked exactly like the pictures. I parked in the gravel driveway, took my bag inside, and immediately noticed that everything smelled clean. Maybe a little too clean. It wasn't unpleasant, just the kind of smell you get when someone wipes down everything quickly, scrubs surfaces, and closes the windows. The floors were hardwood, shiny but slightly creaky. The furniture looked normal, but every chair, every table seemed slightly worn in the middle, like someone had sat in them for years but hadn't really lived there recently. I unpacked slowly and walked through the house. The living room was small, a couch pushed against one wall, a coffee table in the middle, and a TV mounted opposite. The kitchen was basic: stove, fridge, a few cabinets, but clean. The bedroom was at the back, with one window looking out into the yard. Nothing about the place felt threatening. Nothing made me hesitate. I set my bag down, cooked a simple dinner, and went to bed around 10. The first night was uneventful. I slept well, the kind of deep, heavy sleep you get when you're tired from driving all day. The second night, things started to feel off. I had been sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I heard a sound, soft but deliberate, from the kitchen. At first, I thought it was the fridge, but then I realized it was too rhythmic, too intentional, like something was being moved slowly across the counter. I froze. My heart rate sped up. I grabbed my phone and stood silently, listening. The sound stopped. I told myself it was nothing, maybe the floorboards creaking, maybe the wind, but my stomach twisted, and I kept my eyes on the hallway leading to the kitchen. Around midnight, the sound returned. This time it was heavier, a soft dragging noise, like a chair being pulled across the floor. It stopped near the doorway to the living room, just on the other side of the hallway. I couldn't see anything from the bedroom where I had moved, but I could feel the air change, tense and heavy. My instincts screamed that someone, or something, was there. I considered calling the host, but the thought of explaining that I thought someone was in the house made me hesitate. What if they thought I was overreacting? I wanted to check, but the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears made me freeze in place. I listened for a few more minutes, and then the creaking stopped entirely. Silence filled the room, thick and almost suffocating. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Every little noise made me jump. The wind brushing against the windows, the pipes in the walls, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Morning couldn't come soon enough. When it did, I left the bedroom carefully, checking every corner of the house. Nothing appeared out of place. The door was still locked, the window secure, but my nerves didn't settle. I decided to stay on high alert, packing a bag just in case. The third night was the worst. I had hoped that maybe I had imagined the noises, that it was just the house settling or some small animal. But I had learned to trust my instincts, and they screamed at me from the moment the sun went down. Around 11 p.m., I heard it again. The soft scraping, moving from the kitchen toward the living room. I stayed in the bedroom, sitting as close to the locked door as possible, trying to slow my breathing. Then I heard something else. A voice, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. A low muttering, almost a whisper, coming from the living room. I couldn't make out any words. My hands shook. My throat was tight. Every instinct told me to leave immediately, but I didn't know the safest way out. The front door was locked, and I didn't want to run into whoever was there. I grabbed my bag, stuffed some essentials into it, and waited. The voice stopped. The house went silent again. I decided to leave through the back. There was a sliding glass door in the kitchen that led to a small fenced area. I slipped on my shoes and opened it slowly, checking outside. The yard was empty, the trees swaying lightly in the night wind. I moved quickly but carefully through the backyard, sticking close to the fence and avoiding the main lawn where someone might see me. I made it to the edge of the property and into the tree line. I walked quickly, almost running, through the woods until I reached the road. I was lucky. A car passed by within a few minutes, and I flagged it down. The driver, seeing my state, asked if I needed help. I told them I was lost, needing a ride to the nearest town, and they didn't ask any questions. They dropped me at a motel in the next town over, and I stayed there until morning. I didn't look back. Later, I checked the listing online. It had been updated, but nothing about the noises or the night activity was mentioned. The host had added a few minor details about garbage collection and parking, but nothing that explained what I had experienced. I realized I would never stay in that area again, and I resolved to trust my instincts over the convenience or price of any rental. Even months later, I replay the nights in my mind. The dragging sounds, the creaking floorboards, the low, indistinct whisper, the way my heart raced when I imagined someone moving just a few feet away from me, maybe watching, maybe waiting. The fear I felt wasn't physical. No one touched me. But the awareness that I had been inside a house with someone else, unseen, moving around me, was enough to stay with me. I've stayed in many rentals since, but I am hyper-aware now. I check every door and window, inspect the layout, and pay attention to anything unusual. Small spaces, hidden corners, or anything that could be used to monitor someone. I carry my phone ready, flashlight in hand, and try not to get complacent, no matter how peaceful a place looks during the day. The lesson I took from that Airbnb isn't just about safety, it's about instinct. You feel it when something is wrong, even if everything appears normal. The house looked clean, basic, and perfectly fine. The listing gave no reason for concern, but my instincts told me otherwise, and trusting them probably kept me safe. Even now, when I'm alone in a new rental, I check every room before settling in. I check doors, locks, and windows. I note possible exits, and I try to be aware of the smallest sounds. I know now that danger doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't need to. Sometimes it's the silence, the subtle creaks, the almost imperceptible movements that warn you. And if you ignore them, it can be too late. That Airbnb was more than just an unsettling stay. It was a reminder that safety isn't always obvious. You can be careful, you can research, you can read reviews, but you also have to trust the instincts your body gives you when something feels off. That night, my instincts screamed, and I listened. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't. I only know that leaving when I did was the only thing that kept me safe, and I carry that awareness with me in every place I stay. I rented the top unit of a duplex during a road trip. I wanted somewhere cheap and simple for a few nights. Somewhere I could sleep, shower, and park my car safely while I explored the city. The listing said it was a private unit with a quiet street, and that nobody lived downstairs because the lower unit was under renovation. The photos showed a small, clean space. A living room with a couch, a tiny kitchen, a bedroom at the back with one window, and a bathroom. Everything looked normal. Nothing in the pictures or the description suggested any kind of problem. I arrived in the afternoon. The street was quiet. The duplex itself was older, painted white with blue shutters, and had a narrow staircase leading to the top unit. I walked up, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The apartment smelled faintly of wood polish and something slightly musty, like the place had been closed for a few weeks. Everything was clean. The floors creaked slightly, but not unusually for an older building. I put my bag down, walked around, and everything seemed fine. The lower unit was visible from the stairwell. Windows boarded, doors locked. But the host assured me it was empty. The first night was quiet. I cooked a small dinner, watched a show on my laptop, and went to bed around 11:30. The room was dim, warm, and quiet. I slept without incident. The second night, everything changed. I had fallen asleep around midnight, exhausted from driving and sightseeing all day. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke suddenly. At first, I thought it was a dream or the house settling. But then I heard it, footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps. They weren't random creaks or the settling of the floorboards. They had a rhythm, back and forth, like someone was pacing. I froze in bed, listening. The steps were coming from the ceiling. The floor above was non-existent, so that meant downstairs. The footsteps were slow, heavy, and methodical, back and forth, back and forth. Every step made the floor groan under their weight. Then they stopped directly under my bedroom. My heart started racing. I held my breath, afraid that if I moved, they would hear me. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe a maintenance worker who hadn't left? Maybe the owner who had forgotten something downstairs? But none of those possibilities made sense. I had been told nobody lived there, and the unit looked sealed from the outside. A few seconds of silence passed, and then I heard it breathing. Not loud, not panicked, not heavy. Just deliberate, calm breathing. Steady, like someone was standing perfectly still, listening. My chest tightened, my stomach felt like lead, and a cold sweat spread across my back. I didn't move. I didn't reach for my phone. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, straining to hear anything else. The footsteps started again, pacing back and forth across the floor beneath me, then paused, then moved again. I realized I hadn't slept at all, that my eyes were wide open and my muscles were locked in fear. I lay awake for hours, hearing every movement, doors creaking, floorboards groaning, the occasional scuff from something being dragged lightly across the floor. I kept the lights off, thinking maybe that would help me stay hidden, safe. My phone lay next to me, silent, and I didn't want to look at it. The silence outside felt too heavy. Eventually, the noise stopped. Maybe an hour passed, maybe more. I couldn't tell. I stayed still, listening to my own breathing, listening for any hint that someone might be moving again. Morning didn't feel real. When the sun finally came up, I was exhausted, with tight shoulders and a racing heart. I didn't want to stay another night. I packed quickly and walked around the outside of the building before leaving. I wanted to see the lower unit for myself. The door was locked, but I noticed a fresh padlock attached to it, and next to the handle was a smudge. A dirty handprint, smeared but still visible. It looked like someone had grabbed the handle recently. I checked the windows. No curtains, no lights. The whole place seemed empty, and yet the handprint told a different story. Someone had been there. I didn't speak to the host. I didn't explain why I was leaving early. I just left. I didn't drive slowly. I didn't look back. I put as much distance between me and that duplex as I could in the shortest amount of time. Weeks later, I went back to the listing out of curiosity. It had changed. The photos were mostly the same, the unit looked identical, but the description had been updated. In the new wording, it said, "Lower unit occasionally occupied by the owner." That sentence still bothers me. It doesn't say previously occupied or owner sometimes visits. It says now. The lower unit is still occupied. The implication is that the situation I experienced wasn't an accident, a fluke, or a one-time occurrence. Someone could be there while guests sleep above, pacing, listening, maybe watching, maybe waiting. Even months later, the memory hasn't faded. I can remember the sound of the footsteps, the slow, heavy rhythm of them pacing directly under my bedroom. The sound of breathing, calm and deliberate, like someone was patient, calculating, not in a hurry. The feeling of being observed without knowing when or how long. That sense of exposure, of my personal space being violated while I was trapped in my own bedroom. I've stayed in plenty of rentals since then. I check layouts more carefully. I look for doors, other entrances, signs of occupancy that might not be mentioned in the listing. I inspect windows, locks, stairwells, basements, sheds, anything that could hide someone. I've never stayed in a duplex again. The idea that someone could live below you without your knowledge, pacing and listening, is something I can't forget. And every time I hear a creak in a floorboard or footsteps in the distance, when I'm alone somewhere new, my mind immediately goes back to that night. I imagine someone walking below me, listening, waiting, pacing. The thought is simple, but it's enough to make my hands sweat and my chest tighten. That duplex wasn't just an Airbnb. It was a trap I almost didn't notice, a place where someone else had access without any warning. The new listing wording made me realize I hadn't imagined it. Someone really could be down there, and that thought that someone might still be pacing in the lower unit as I type this now is the part that haunts me the most. It's not the footsteps themselves that linger in my memory. It's the knowledge of what they meant. Someone, awake in the dark, moving slowly, deliberately, listening. Not random, not careless, just patient. And that patience is what terrifies me even now, because it means they could do it again at any time, and no one would know until it was too late. I booked the Airbnb because it was cheap and close to the beach. Work had been stressful, and I wanted somewhere quiet where I could sleep, walk near the water, and just disconnect. The listing wasn't impressive, but it looked clean. It had one bedroom, a small living room, a little kitchenette, and a bathroom. The reviews weren't detailed, just short sentences like, "Good stay" or "Nice place." Nothing seemed wrong. Nothing made me hesitate. When I arrived, the place felt normal. The outside was a small gray building with chipped paint, one parking space, and a short path leading to the front door. Inside, Everything smelled like lemon cleaner. Strong. Almost too strong. Like someone had wiped everything down quickly before I got there. The couch was worn and soft in the middle, like a lot of people had sat there. The TV was small and mounted low on the wall. The bedspread looked new, stiff, and bright white compared to everything else in the room. I set my bag down, walked around, and didn't notice anything strange. I was tired from driving, so I didn't think too deeply about the way the house felt lived in but somehow empty at the same time. The first night was uneventful. I cooked something simple, watched videos on my laptop, and went to sleep. The sound of waves in the distance helped calm me. The bedroom window was cracked open a little, and I could hear the soft wind and the faint ocean noise. I slept fine. It was the second night when everything changed. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I realized my charger was in the bedroom. I walked in, grabbed it, and went to plug it into an outlet near the TV because there weren't many outlets in the place. The TV was mounted close to the wall, so I had to crouch down and reach behind it. While I was down there, something caught my eye. There was a tiny circular hole in the wall. Not a nail hole, not damage. It was perfectly round, small, and positioned directly facing the center of the bed. At first, my brain tried to explain it away. Old wires, maybe? A screw hole from something once mounted there? Houses get weird marks all the time. But this one felt intentional. Too intentional. I leaned closer. The hole wasn't random. The paint around it was smooth, like someone drilled it after painting the wall. That detail bothered me more than anything, the effort. My heartbeat slowed in that strange heavy way fear makes happen. Like something in your body locks up before your mind does. I pressed my fingertips gently against the wall around the hole. Something moved. A soft shift, like plastic sliding or something small adjusting behind the drywall. That sensation shot a cold rush through my whole body. It wasn't natural movement. It wasn't the wall flexing. Something was behind it. I pulled my hand away fast and just crouched there staring at the tiny hole. My breathing changed, slow and shaky. I didn't want to assume the worst, but my thoughts went there anyway. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I hesitated for a few seconds because a part of me didn't want to see what was there, but curiosity mixed with fear pushed me forward. I leaned down again, lined the flashlight with the hole, and aimed the beam inside. At first, all I saw was darkness. Then something glinted, a tiny reflection. A curved reflection. The reflection of a lens. It wasn't a wire hole or damage or anything normal. It was a camera, hidden, pointing directly at the bed. Recording. My chest tightened so fast it hurt. Every nerve felt sharp and awake. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was the feeling of being exposed, violated, watched. I replayed my first night in that place in my head. Me sleeping, me changing clothes, me just doing normal things thinking I was alone. I didn't unplug anything. I didn't pack slowly. I didn't even think clearly. My body went into a pure survival panic. I shoved clothes back into my bag, didn't fold them, didn't check drawers, didn't check the bathroom. I left my toothbrush still in the cup near the sink. I grabbed what mattered, wallet, keys, bag, and walked straight out. I didn't lock the door. I didn't look back at the house. I walked to my car fast but tried to look normal. My hands were shaking so hard that when I unlocked the car, the keys hit the door once before I got them in. When I finally sat inside with the doors locked, I just sat there breathing hard and staring at the house. The curtains were closed. No lights turned on. No movement. Nothing changed. But the whole time I watched the dark windows, I felt like someone was watching me back. I drove away and didn't stop until I reached a gas station 20 minutes down the highway. I parked under bright lights, somewhere public, somewhere with people around. Only then did I open the Airbnb app and report the listing. My message wasn't calm or organized. My words were fast, panicked, full of mistakes. I uploaded the photo I took of the camera hole. I expected an immediate response, some kind of urgent message, something that matched what I felt. Instead, I got an automated reply telling me the case would be reviewed. I slept in my car that night. I didn't care how uncomfortable it was. I didn't want another rented room, another unfamiliar wall, another outlet or mirror or vent that could be hiding something. Days passed. then weeks, then months. Finally, I got an email saying the listing had been removed for policy violations. There was no explanation, no confirmation about what I found, no acknowledgement that someone recorded me, or maybe recorded other people before me. Just a short sentence. The listing has been taken down. Nothing else. No apology. No closure. After that, normal travel changed for me. Hotels, motels, Airbnbs, it didn't matter. Every room felt suspicious. Every outlet, smoke detector, air vent, or wall fixture made my stomach tighten. I found myself running my hand along walls, checking for unusual marks, tiny holes, odd wiring. Sometimes I would pull furniture away from the wall or shine my flashlight behind things before settling in. Most of the time, I found nothing, but every time I checked, the same question came back and stayed with me. How many places never get caught? How many hidden cameras are out there that no one ever finds? How many times did someone sit behind a screen and watch strangers sleep, change, live, completely unaware they were being observed? Sometimes when I lie in a hotel bed now, with the lights off and the room quiet, I stare at the walls and wonder how many eyes the darkness hides. And the worst part is knowing the camera I found was only one. There could have been more. There could still be more anywhere I stay, and I'll never really know if I'm alone. I booked the Airbnb in Nashville because it was cheap, close to the office I needed to visit, and the pictures made it look simple and clean. It wasn't anything fancy: white walls, basic furniture, a small kitchen, and a little living area with a couch and a TV. The listing said it was a private unit, quiet neighborhood, perfect for work travel. I didn't get any weird feelings from the listing. No bad reviews, nothing strange. Just another boring rental. I got there in the afternoon. The outside looked like an older small duplex house that had been split into two separate units. Fresh paint, new door locks, small gravel parking area. The area felt normal. Other houses, a couple cars, a quiet street. It didn't seem unsafe or run down. I carried my bag in, walked around the place, and everything seemed clean. The bathroom looked newly renovated. The bed looked fine. The kitchen had the basics. The air smelled a little stale, like it hadn't been opened in a while, but that didn't bother me. The only thing that stood out, and I didn't pay much attention to it at first, was a solid white door in the hallway near the bedroom. It looked different from the other doors. No frame molding, no styling, just a plain, flat door. It had a deadbolt lock on my side, locked, and a cheap round knob under it. I assumed it was a closet or maybe a utility room. The Airbnb listing didn't mention it, and nothing seemed odd about it besides the cheap look of it, so I ignored it. The rest of the evening was normal. I worked on my laptop at the table, ordered food, watched TV for a bit, then got ready for bed. The bed was firm and the room felt quiet. I checked the front door twice before sleeping, just out of habit. Everything was locked. At around 2 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. I wasn't having a nightmare and nothing was loud. I just opened my eyes like my body knew something was off. The room was dim because I left the bathroom light on with the door half open. That faint yellow light made the hallway visible from where I was. That's when I heard a sound. It wasn't loud at first, just a faint clicking noise. At first, I thought it was the air conditioning vent expanding with temperature change. Old houses do that. So I listened for a few seconds, expecting it to fade or shift like normal house noises do. But it didn't. It repeated, slow and spaced apart. A small metallic click, then a pause, then another click. It felt too controlled and too slow to be random. It sounded like a lock being turned, but not fully, just someone gently testing movement. I lay still, staring at the hallway. My heart started beating harder as I realized the sound wasn't coming from the air vent or the front door. It was coming from that locked door beside the bedroom, the plain one I hadn't given much thought to. I stayed completely quiet. The clicking continued, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Then I realized the sound wasn't random. It felt intentional, like whoever was behind that door was trying to turn the lock as slowly and quietly as possible. The clicking stopped, and for a few seconds everything went silent. I strained my ears, breathing shallow and slow. Then I heard the knob. Just a tiny shift. Not a twist, just pressure. Like someone was testing if it would move. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stared at the hallway, waiting. After maybe 30 seconds, the lock clicked again, this time in the opposite direction. It felt like someone started unlocking it, then changed their mind. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing else. Just a person standing behind that door. I stayed awake the rest of the night with every light on. The knob jiggled maybe 3 more times, spaced out by an hour or so. Each time I felt the same cold fear spread across my chest. I thought about calling the police, but I kept talking myself out of it in my mind. I kept telling myself maybe the building was old and had shared utilities, or maybe it was a maintenance closet. But deep down, I knew someone was on the other side. When the sun finally came up, I felt exhausted and shaky. I packed quickly and got ready to leave. Before I walked out, I moved a small dining chair and pushed it tightly against the door, just in case. Even though I knew I wasn't staying another night, it felt like something I should do. That's when I noticed something I didn't see before. Maybe because I never walked that close to the door. Down near the bottom of the frame, right where the wood met the floor, there were scratch marks. Not random ones from furniture. These were thin, narrow, repeated lines, all focused around the gap between the door and the frame. Like someone tried prying the door open with something thin. Maybe a screwdriver or a blade. They weren't old either. The marks looked fresh. Clean wood exposed, like whatever made them happen not long ago. That was the moment my fear turned into a heavy, sick feeling. Someone had tried to get through that door before. Someone had put effort into it. I took pictures in case I needed them later. The scratch marks, the door, the locks. When I finally stepped out and locked the front door behind me, I looked at the other half of the duplex from outside. The windows were covered with thick black curtains. No lights, no noise, no sign of movement. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. Once I was parked at the office parking lot, I opened the Airbnb app and messaged the host. I didn't want to accuse them of anything. I just asked why the connecting door wasn't sealed or explained, and if someone had access to it. I saw the message show as read. No reply, no explanation, nothing. Hours passed, still nothing. That night, after work, I checked the listing again. It was gone, no longer available. The pictures disappeared and the listing said it was removed or suspended. I tried messaging the host again, but the account showed as inactive. I never got an answer. I never found out who was on the other side of that door or why it existed in the first place. I tried searching the address online later, just curiosity turning into anxiety, but nothing came up except an old rental listing from months ago. That listing said, shared basement access, which wasn't in the Airbnb description. Sometimes I think about how quiet the person behind that door was. The slow movements, the way they tested the lock like they weren't in a hurry. That part stayed with me. It wasn't someone surprised or lost. It was someone who had done that before. Someone who knew to take their time. Someone who expected silence on the other side. After that trip, I never booked an Airbnb without checking every detail, every review, every layout. And even now, sometimes when a house settles or a door makes a small noise late at night, I catch myself listening the same way I did in Nashville, waiting for that slow, deliberate click of someone trying to come through. And the worst part is, I'll never know how close they came.